Imagine waking up tomorrow and hearing that one of the richest women in America had simply disappeared. No ransom, no body, no witnesses. The FBI searched for nearly a week. State police searched every road, every hotel, every security camera they could find. The media called it the biggest missing person case of the year. They stopped talking about finding her. Instead, they started talking about replacing her. Everyone accepted one simple truth. The billionaire was gone forever. Everyone, except one quiet black single father, who had never met her. He wasn't a detective. He wasn't an FBI agent. He wasn't even part of the search. But when he noticed one tiny clue buried beside an old mountain trail, he realized something that hundreds of investigators had completely missed. She hadn't disappeared. She was still alive. And the people pretending to search for her were actually making sure nobody ever found her first. Because whoever reached her next wasn't coming to rescue her. The morning Isabella Vaughn disappeared, America didn't lose just another billionaire. It lost the woman who built the world's most advanced cybersecurity empire from a one-room apartment above her father's auto repair shop. For nearly a decade, Isabella had been called many things. The Silicon Queen. The woman who outsmarted governments. The billionaire who never lost. She appeared on magazine covers, advised presidents, rejected billion-dollar buyout offers without blinking. But the people closest to her knew something the cameras never captured. For the past 6 months, Isabella had stopped trusting almost everyone around her, even inside her own company. Especially inside her own company. 7 days before she vanished, Vaughn Systems announced what financial analysts called the biggest technology breakthrough in modern history. A satellite-based cyber defense network capable of protecting hospitals, airports, power grids, and military communications from massive cyber attacks. The contract was rumored to be worth nearly $80 billion. Every major defense contractor wanted it. Every competitor feared it. Every board member suddenly had more to gain than ever before. Yet Isabella postponed the final signing. She never explained why. Only her personal assistant noticed the change. Every evening, after the board meetings ended, Isabella stayed alone in her office, reviewing the same group of confidential files. And again, and again, sometimes until 2 in the morning. She no longer used company security. She stopped eating in the executive dining room. She canceled 3 overseas business trips. She even dismissed her longtime driver. When people asked if something was wrong, she smiled. "I'm just being careful." No one understood what she meant. Meanwhile, almost 300 miles away, life looked completely different for Elijah Brooks. His alarm rang every morning at 5:15. Not because he had an important meeting, but because his 12-year-old daughter Maya had asthma. The cold mountain mornings often made her breathing worse. Before opening his tiny outdoor equipment repair shop, Elijah always prepared breakfast first. Fresh fruit. Then he checked Maya's inhaler before she left for school. The routine never changed. Not once. Their home sat outside the small Colorado town of Pine Ridge. A quiet place where everybody knew everyone. The kind of town where people waved from pickup trucks. Where children still rode bicycles without fear. And where Elijah was known simply as the man who never quits. Most people didn't know why. Few even knew what he had done before opening his repair shop. Years earlier, Elijah had served with one of Colorado's elite wilderness search and rescue teams. For almost 14 years, he specialized in tracking missing hikers through mountains where helicopters couldn't safely fly. He wasn't famous. He never appeared on television. His greatest victories were measured differently. A child returned home. An elderly camper found alive. A lost family reunited before sunset. When reporters asked for interviews, he always declined. The families deserve the attention. Not me. Everything changed. 6 years earlier, his wife, Naomi, died from a sudden heart condition. After that, Elijah resigned. Not because he forgot how to save people. Because every successful rescue reminded him there had been one person he couldn't save. Since then, he repaired backpacks, climbing gear, hiking boots, and camping equipment. Quiet work. Honest work. Enough to support Maya. Enough to stay close to the mountains he still loved. On Friday afternoon, customers crowded into the repair shop preparing for the weekend hiking season. An elderly couple needed tent poles repaired. 2 college students rented snowshoes. A father asked Elijah to inspect his son's climbing harness. Business was steady. Nothing unusual. Until the television hanging above the cash register suddenly switched to breaking news. Every conversation stopped. A helicopter camera showed flashing police lights surrounding the entrance to Vaughn Systems headquarters. The reporter spoke rapidly. Billionaire CEO Isabella Vaughn has been missing for nearly 6 hours after failing to arrive at a private charity retreat outside Aspen. No contact has been made. Authorities are refusing to rule out foul play. Inside the shop, everyone stared silently. One customer whispered, "They'll find her by morning." Another nodded. "With that kind of money? She probably has 20 security teams looking already." The television continued. The FBI has now joined state investigators. Private aircraft. Tracking helicopters. 9 units. Cell phone analysts. The largest coordinated search operation in Colorado this year. Elijah watched quietly, then returned to repairing a damaged hiking boot. Maya looked at him curiously. "Dad, don't you think they'll find her?" He smiled softly. "I hope so. But mountains don't care how rich someone is." That evening, rain swept across the valley, heavy enough to erase footprints, strong enough to wash away scents. Elijah stood outside his workshop locking the front door when he noticed something unusual. 3 black luxury SUVs sped north toward the mountains. No police markings. No emergency lights. No state vehicles. Just dark windows. All traveling together. Too fast for the weather. He watched until the convoy disappeared around the bend. Something felt wrong. Professional search teams rarely drove without visible identification, especially during a high-profile missing person investigation. Still, he said nothing. Maybe they belonged to private security. Maybe they didn't. Either way, it wasn't his business anymore. At least, that's what he told himself. The next morning, every news channel carried only one story. Isabella Vaughn. Her face filled airports, gas stations, restaurants, shopping malls, electronic billboards. America searched together. The governor promised unlimited resources. The FBI expanded the operation. Thousands of volunteers registered online. Search aircraft filled the skies over western Colorado. By Sunday, nothing. No vehicle. No ransom demand. No confirmed sightings. Not even a single personal item. Investigators described it as an impossible disappearance. But Elijah couldn't stop thinking about those 3 black SUVs. Something about them refused to leave his mind. Monday morning, he drove toward Eagle Pass to deliver repaired climbing equipment to a customer. The highway curved along an old forest access road rarely used anymore. As he slowed near a washed-out bridge, his eyes caught something lying beside the gravel shoulder. Most drivers would never have noticed it. It was half buried beneath wet pine needles. Colorful, almost invisible. Elijah pulled over. He climbed down carefully, brushed away the dirt, and froze. It wasn't trash. It wasn't camping gear. It was a tiny woven friendship bracelet. Blue. Silver thread. On the inside, stitched so small most people would miss it, were 2 embroidered letters. Ivy. Elijah turned the bracelet over slowly. The leather clasp hadn't weathered naturally. It had been torn off. Recently. Very recently. He looked toward the forest. Then back at the empty highway. The official search area was more than 20 miles away. So what? Was something carrying Isabella Vaughn's initials? Lying here, where no search team had even looked. Elijah remained crouched beside the roadside for nearly a full minute. The bracelet rested in his gloved hand, surprisingly heavy for something so small. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't decorated with diamonds or gold. It looked handmade, the kind of bracelet a child would give someone they loved. He brushed away more pine needles around the spot. No tire tracks. No broken branches. No obvious signs of a struggle. But one detail immediately bothered him. The bracelet wasn't weathered. It hadn't spent days exposed to rain and mountain wind. It looked as if it had landed there only hours earlier. Someone, or something, had been here after Isabella disappeared. Elijah slipped the bracelet into a small evidence pouch he kept from his rescue days. Old habits never truly disappeared. Instead of driving away, he slowly walked 20 yards into the trees. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No hikers. No campers. Not even birds. Then he noticed another strange detail. Several branches had been snapped nearly 7 feet above the ground. Not by wildlife. Not by falling snow. By something large forcing its way through. He followed the broken limbs until the trail ended at a muddy clearing. Fresh tire impressions. Large off-road vehicles. At least 3 of them. But none matched the tread pattern used by Colorado Search and Rescue. Elijah took several photographs with his phone. He compared the tire width to his own boot. Military-grade all-terrain tires. Far heavier than ordinary civilian trucks. His stomach tightened. Whoever came here had equipment, organization, and enough confidence to drive into protected forest land without permission. Back in Pine Ridge, television coverage had become even more dramatic. The FBI announced that Isabella's phone had been switched off less than 40 minutes after she left the charity gala. Her armored SUV had been discovered abandoned outside Aspen. The driver was missing. Security cameras captured nothing after the vehicle entered a mountain highway tunnel. The nation watched every update. Experts debated kidnapping. Financial analysts discussed what would happen to Vaughn Systems without its founder. The company's board issued carefully worded statements promising stability. Its acting chairman, Richard Calder, appeared before cameras looking deeply concerned. "Our only priority is bringing Isabella home safely." Millions believed him. Elijah wasn't so sure. That evening Maya finished her homework while Elijah quietly spread maps across the kitchen table. She watched him studying them. "Dad, are you going back into the mountains? I'm only trying to understand something." She looked toward the television. "They already have hundreds of people searching." "They don't need you." Elijah smiled. "I know. But sometimes, the place everyone is searching is exactly where the truth isn't." Maya lowered her voice. "Mom used to say you could hear mountains talking." Elijah looked toward the window. She was right. If you listen carefully enough, they always leave clues. The next morning he drove back before sunrise. Fog covered the valley. Perfect weather for hiding movement. He parked nearly a mile away and continued on foot. Instead of following the vehicle tracks, he searched the surrounding slopes. Within 20 minutes, he found something unexpected. A disposable coffee cup. Still warm. He touched the lid. Someone had left less than an hour earlier. Printed on the side was the logo of an upscale cafe in downtown Denver. The nearest location was almost 150 miles away. Professional search teams didn't drive across the state carrying fresh coffee from Denver. Whoever had been here wasn't camping. They were operating. A faint buzzing echoed above the trees. Elijah immediately stepped beneath heavy pine cover. A drone. But far quieter than law enforcement equipment. It moved slowly across the valley, stopping every few seconds before changing direction. Not filming scenery. Searching. Elijah stayed perfectly still until it disappeared beyond the ridge. His heartbeat slowed. Someone else was looking for something. Or someone. And they clearly didn't want to be noticed. Before leaving, Elijah searched one final section near the clearing. A glint of metal caught his attention beneath wet leaves. He carefully uncovered it. Not a weapon. Not jewelry. A custom-made cufflink. Solid platinum. Engraved with a stylized falcon. He stared at it for several seconds. He had seen that symbol before. Not on television. In a magazine article months earlier. The falcon was the private insignia used exclusively by Vaughn Systems' Executive Protection Division. Only senior executives carried accessories bearing that emblem. Why would one be lying 20 miles outside the official search zone? Someone from Isabella's own company had been here. By afternoon, Elijah made a decision he had avoided for 3 days. He drove directly to the county sheriff's office. Sheriff Daniel Hayes listened patiently while examining the bracelet, photographs, and tire tracks. When Elijah finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair. "You're asking me to believe someone inside Vaughn Systems is running a private operation outside the official search? I'm asking you to look." Hayes sighed. "The FBI already controls this investigation. If I start moving deputies based on theories, they'll bury my department." Elijah nodded slowly. "I understand." The sheriff slid the evidence pouch back across the desk. "I'm sorry, but I can't authorize anything." As Elijah walked toward the parking lot, a black SUV rolled silently past the sheriff's building. Dark windows. No government plates. The passenger briefly looked directly at him. Just for a second. Then the vehicle continued without stopping. Elijah memorized the license plate automatically. Years of rescue work had trained him never to ignore details. That night, something happened that changed everything. At exactly 11:42 p.m., Elijah's workshop security camera detected movement outside. His phone vibrated on the bedside table. He quietly got out of bed without waking Maya. Opening the live camera feed, he saw a hooded figure standing beside his truck. The stranger wasn't trying to steal it. Instead, he slowly placed a sealed envelope beneath the windshield wiper, then disappeared into the darkness before Elijah could reach the front door. 5 minutes later, Elijah stepped outside. The street was empty. No headlights. No footsteps. Only the envelope. There was no stamp. No return address. Inside was a single folded photograph. The image showed Isabella Vaughn. She wasn't dead. She wasn't injured. She was sitting in a dimly lit room, looking directly at the camera. The timestamp in the corner had been printed less than 6 hours earlier. Taped to the back was a handwritten message in black ink. "Stop searching where they tell you to search." Below that, one final sentence made Elijah's blood run cold. "They're watching your daughter now." The note stayed in Elijah's hands long after the porch light shut off. "They're watching your daughter now." Those 5 words frightened him more than any mountain storm ever had. He looked up and scanned the quiet street. Nothing moved. No engines. No footsteps. Only fresh snow drifting beneath the streetlights. Whoever delivered the envelope hadn't wanted money. They hadn't demanded silence. They had delivered a warning. Or a threat. Maybe both. Elijah folded the photograph carefully and slipped it into his jacket before locking every door in the house. Then he walked quietly to Maya's bedroom. She slept peacefully, completely unaware that someone had spoken her name without ever writing it. For a long moment, Elijah simply stood there. 6 years earlier, after losing his wife, he had made himself one promise. No matter what happened, Maya would never become part of someone else's battle. Tonight, that promise suddenly felt impossible to keep. Before sunrise, Elijah called the only person he trusted outside Pine Ridge. Rachel Monroe. They had worked together years earlier on Colorado's elite wilderness rescue unit. Unlike Elijah, Rachel never left public service. She eventually became an investigator with the State Bureau of Investigation. They hadn't spoken in nearly 18 months. She answered on the second ring. "Elijah, I need a favor. I figured if you were calling before 6 in the morning, it wasn't to catch up. There are things I can't explain over the phone." Rachel heard something in his voice. "Where are you?" "My shop. I'll be there in 2 hours." Rachel arrived driving an ordinary silver pickup instead of a government vehicle. That alone told Elijah she was taking him seriously. Inside the repair shop, he spread everything across the workbench. The friendship bracelet. The cufflink. The photographs of tire tracks. The anonymous picture of Isabella. Finally, the handwritten warning. Rachel examined each item without speaking. When she finished, she looked directly at him. "You didn't show this to anyone else?" "Only the sheriff." She sighed quietly. "That explains why someone knows you're involved." She picked up the photograph again. "The timestamp isn't fake." "You checked." "I don't have to." The digital print marks are authentic. Elijah felt his heartbeat quicken. So she really was alive. Rachel nodded. At least 6 hours before this picture was printed. Then she noticed something everyone else would probably miss. A reflection. Tiny. Barely visible inside the glass behind Isabella. Rachel enlarged the image on her tablet. The reflection showed part of a white sign. Only 3 letters could be read. ID. Nothing more. What does RID mean? Elijah asked. Rachel shook her head. I don't know. But I know someone who might. She contacted an old forensic imaging specialist in Denver. Within 45 minutes he called back. I enhanced the reflection. There are more letters. Rachel activated speakerphone. The technician continued. It's not RID. It's... He paused. Ridge. Elijah and Rachel looked at each other instantly. Colorado had dozens of places with Ridge in the name. But one location stood above all the others. Red Ridge Industrial Park. An abandoned manufacturing district outside Glenwood Springs. Most of its warehouses had been empty for years. Almost nobody went there anymore. Rachel frowned. If someone wanted to hide a person, it would be perfect. But why send you a clue? Elijah stared at the photograph. They don't want me to stop. They want me to keep following. Rachel nodded slowly. Which means, someone inside their operation is helping Isabella. Meanwhile, nearly 100 miles away, inside Vaughn Systems headquarters, the atmosphere had changed completely. Board members no longer looked worried. They looked impatient. Richard Calder stood before a wall-sized digital display. The media is starting to ask the wrong questions. One executive shifted nervously. The FBI keeps requesting financial records. Richard smiled calmly. Let them. They're searching for kidnapping. They're looking in the wrong direction. A woman sitting near the end of the conference table finally spoke. What about Elijah Brooks? Richard's smile disappeared. He found something. He shouldn't have. Fix it. No one asked what he meant. No one needed to. Back in Pine Ridge, Rachel insisted Maya stay with her sister until everything became clearer. Maya hugged her father tightly. Are you coming later? I promise. You always keep your promises. Elijah smiled. I'll see you soon. As Rachel drove away with Maya, Elijah finally allowed himself to breathe. Now, he could move without worrying someone would reach his daughter first. By early afternoon, Elijah and Rachel arrived outside Red Ridge Industrial Park. The place looked abandoned. Broken windows. Collapsed fences. Rust covering nearly every building. But appearances lied. Fresh tire tracks crossed the snow. Generators hummed somewhere inside the complex. A delivery truck sat behind Warehouse 12. No company logo. No license plates. Rachel whispered. Definitely not abandoned. They climbed a nearby hillside overlooking the property. Using binoculars, Elijah counted 6 armed security guards. Not mall security. Professionals. Military posture. Radio earpieces. Coordinated patrol routes. Rachel quietly photographed everything. Then Elijah noticed something that made his stomach tighten. A black helicopter. Hidden beneath camouflage netting. Its tail carried no registration number. Only a silver falcon painted near the rear door. The same falcon engraved on the platinum cufflink. Just before sunset, a dark SUV entered the compound. Everyone inside immediately snapped to attention. The rear passenger stepped out. Richard Calder. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't negotiating. He walked confidently toward Warehouse 12 as though visiting his own office. Rachel whispered, "Whatever's happening, it's inside that building." Before Elijah could answer, another vehicle arrived. This one carried medical equipment. 2 men unloaded oxygen tanks and emergency supplies. Not for transporting someone, for keeping someone alive. Elijah focused his binoculars on the warehouse entrance. For one brief second, the heavy metal door opened. Inside, he caught the silhouette of a woman sitting in a chair. Long dark hair, gray sweater, hands restrained. She lifted her head toward the light. just long enough for Elijah to recognize her face. Isabella Vaughn. Alive. Only 50 yards away. Rachel reached for her phone. We're calling the FBI. Elijah grabbed her wrist. Wait. She looked at him, confused. What? He pointed toward the warehouse roof. Hidden beneath the ventilation system, almost invisible against the steel, was a blinking red light. Not a security camera. Not an alarm. A military-grade signal jammer. Rachel's expression changed instantly. They're blocking communications. Elijah nodded. If we call now, the signal won't leave. At that exact moment, one of the guards slowly turned toward the hillside. He lowered his binoculars, then raised a rifle fitted with a thermal scope. Without saying a single word, he pointed directly toward the patch of trees where Elijah and Rachel were hiding. Rachel barely managed to whisper, "They know we're here." The guard didn't shout. He didn't fire immediately. He simply raised his rifle and stared directly toward the hillside. For one endless second, no one moved. Then Rachel whispered only one word. "Run." She and Elijah slid backward down the rocky slope just as a burst of bullets tore through the branches above them. Splinters exploded into the cold evening air. The guards had thermal optics. Hiding wasn't going to work for long. Elijah knew the terrain. That was their only advantage. Instead of running deeper into the forest, he led Rachel downhill toward an abandoned drainage tunnel he had explored years earlier during a rescue operation. Behind them, 3 security teams spread out with military precision. They weren't panicking. They weren't guessing. Someone had trained them well. Their radios crackled continuously. North Ridge clear. 2 targets moving southwest. Intercept at Tunnel Road. Elijah suddenly stopped. Rachel almost ran into him. What are you doing? They're hurting us. What? They already know where we're supposed to run. He looked toward the frozen creek. They've seen these maps too. Instead of entering the drainage tunnel, Elijah turned sharply uphill. Exactly the opposite direction. Inside Warehouse 12, Isabella heard distant gunfire. Richard Calder smiled. They found your rescuer. She looked up calmly. You've already lost. Richard laughed. Really? The FBI doesn't even know you're here. You blocked every communication tower. No one is coming. Isabella leaned back despite the restraints around her wrists. You've spent your whole career believing technology controls everything. You forgot one thing. Richard narrowed his eyes. What? People. Half a mile away. Rachel suddenly stopped running. My phone. Elijah looked at her. The screen showed no signal. Exactly as expected. But then, one small notification appeared. Not from the cellular network. Satellite emergency link. Available. Rachel smiled. The jammer only blocks ground towers. My emergency satellite beacon still works. She activated it. One button. No phone call. No conversation. Just coordinates. Then they kept moving. Back inside the warehouse. Richard's radio suddenly crackled. His chief of security sounded nervous for the first time all night. Sir. We've lost visual. Richard frowned. Find them. They changed direction. Richard slammed the radio onto the table. Impossible. He walked toward Isabella. You should have died 6 days ago. You've ruined everything. She looked directly into his eyes. No. You ruined yourself. 20 minutes later, the first helicopter appeared. Not Richard's. Federal. Its searchlight swept across the industrial park. Every guard froze. Another helicopter followed. Then another. Black SUVs poured onto the access road from every direction. FBI. U.S. Marshals. Colorado State Bureau of Investigation. Someone had answered Rachel's emergency beacon. Richard looked through the warehouse window. His face finally changed. For the first time, he looked afraid. Elijah and Rachel watched dozens of federal agents surround the property. Loudspeakers echoed across the valley. Federal agents. Drop your weapons. Security guards looked toward Richard's helicopter. then toward the growing line of armored vehicles. One by one, rifles hit the ground. No one wanted to die protecting a billionaire's conspiracy. Richard made one desperate decision. He grabbed Isabella by the arm. "If I'm leaving, you're leaving with me." He dragged her toward the helicopter. But he had forgotten one thing. Isabella wasn't the frightened woman he had kidnapped 6 days earlier. The moment he loosened his grip, she drove her shoulder into his chest with all the strength she had left. Richard stumbled backward. Before he could recover, Elijah reached him. Years of rescue work had never made Elijah violent, but it had taught him exactly how to stop someone without unnecessary force. One controlled movement. Richard hit the frozen ground. The pistol slid several feet across the concrete. FBI agents rushed forward. Within seconds, handcuffs clicked shut around Richard Calder's wrists. The man who had spent months planning the perfect disappearance was arrested in front of the woman he thought the world would never see again. The investigation unfolded over the following weeks. Federal investigators uncovered encrypted financial records showing Richard had secretly negotiated the sale of Vaughn Systems' revolutionary defense technology to an overseas criminal network. Isabella had discovered the transfers during an internal audit. Before she could expose him, Richard staged her disappearance. The abandoned industrial park had been prepared months in advance. The fake search efforts, the anonymous misinformation, the hired security teams, everything had been designed to buy him 1 extra week. 1 week was all he needed. Instead, one ordinary father destroyed the entire plan. The sheriff who had dismissed Elijah's concerns visited Pine Ridge himself. He stood quietly inside the repair shop. "I owe you an apology." Elijah looked up from repairing an old hiking boot. "You don't owe me anything. I should have listened." Elijah smiled gently. "The important part is that she's alive." The sheriff nodded. "I won't make that mistake again." Several days later, Isabella returned to Vaughn Systems. Employees filled the lobby expecting a speech. Instead, she walked past the cameras, past the reporters, past the television crews, until she reached the back row. Elijah stood there wearing the same worn jacket he had worn in the mountains. She smiled. "Would you come up here?" He shook his head. "I'm exactly where I belong." The room laughed softly. Isabella stepped down from the stage instead. Standing beside him, she spoke into every microphone. "The world keeps celebrating powerful people. But power didn't save my life. Money didn't save my life. Technology didn't save my life." She looked at Elijah. "A father with integrity did." The room erupted in applause. Elijah looked uncomfortable, just the way he always did when people praised him. A week later, a representative from Vaughn Systems arrived at Elijah's repair shop carrying a contract worth several $1,000,000. It included a luxury home, a lifetime salary, and a senior executive position. Elijah read exactly 1 page before closing the folder. "I appreciate it, but this isn't my life." The representative looked stunned. "You'd turn all this down?" Elijah smiled. "My daughter already thinks I'm rich. I get to eat breakfast with her every morning. I don't know how anyone could improve on that." Instead of accepting the money, Elijah made one request. "If you really want to thank me, build more search and rescue stations in places people forget. Families don't care who gets credit. They only care that someone keeps looking." Isabella nodded without hesitation. "It'll be done." And it was. Within a year, 12 new wilderness rescue centers opened across Colorado, each one equipped with advanced drones, medical supplies, and highly trained volunteers. None carried Elijah's name. Just as he requested, life slowly returned to normal. Maya went back to school. Elijah returned to repairing backpacks, boots, and climbing gear. Most customers never mentioned the news anymore, and he preferred it that way. One snow evening, just before closing the shop, the phone rang. A frightened father spoke through tears. "My little boy disappeared while hiking. The official search ended an hour ago." Elijah quietly looked toward the rescue pack that still sat beside the door. Always packed, always ready. He smiled gently. I'm on my way. He switched off the workshop lights, locked the door, and disappeared into the falling snow once again. Because while the world often stopped searching, Elijah Brooks never did.